Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into your source material, specifically this excerpt you shared. Sounds like it's called day14.mp3.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus, well, it's a big one. A challenge that, let's be honest, trips up pretty much everyone learning English. Those common grammar mistakes.
That's right. It really is a universal thing when you're learning English, isn't it? Or, well, any language, really. You put a sentence together in your head, you say it, and then there's that little flicker of doubt. Was that okay? Did I say that right?
Totally. Or someone maybe gives you a little correction, very helpful, but you're left thinking, okay, but why was mine wrong? What was the actual issue there?
Exactly. That why is key.
So yeah, our mission today for this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to unpack this source you gave us, pull out the really crucial bits about these mistakes that pop up all the time, and importantly, look at the simple, practical ways the source suggests you can actually spot them and, fix them.
And the main goal, reading through your source, it seems pretty clear. It's about helping you sound, well, more natural, I suppose, more confident when you're speaking English.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's worth saying up front, the source seems to frame this whole thing really supportively. It's not about pointing fingers. Grammar mistakes are just, well, they're a totally normal part of learning.
Oh, absolutely.
They happen all the time when you're figuring things out. And, the source even mentions native speakers sometimes make slips too, especially when just chatting casually.
Oh, for sure. Happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're coming at this with a really supportive vibe. It's not about, instant perfection. Nobody expects that.
No, not at all.
It's much more about making progress, becoming more aware, and just getting a better feel for how the language actually fits together.
Precisely. Think of it like this deep dive is putting a spotlight on those specific areas, your source flags, as common pitfalls, little tricky spots. By focusing on them, you can start listening for them in your own speech. Maybe notice them when others talk, and then consciously work on tweaking them. It's a kind of targeted practice.
Okay, so let's dive into that universal challenge then. Grammar mistakes. Your source really sets the scene well. You know that feeling, right? You're trying to get an idea out. The words are coming, but there's that little nagging voice. Which tense was that again? Should there be a little word like before that noun? Did I forget something?
Oh, absolutely. Every single English learner knows that feeling. The source really validates that, saying it's something everyone goes through, from the absolute beginner trying to form their first sentences, right, through to advanced learners who are pretty fluent but still polishing things, especially when you're speaking on the spot, maybe a bit nervous. Those little grammar points, the fiddly ones, they're the first things to wobble a bit.
It is really reassuring, actually, to know you're not the only one wrestling with this stuff. And the really good news, according to the source material anyway, is that a lot of these common mistakes, the ones that keep popping up, they aren't these deep, dark mysteries. Often they're quite systematic, and once you actually understand why English does it a certain way and what the mistake actually is, the fix can be, well, surprisingly simple sometimes.
Yes, exactly. The objective your source sets out is very practical. It's like, let's find the most common errors, the ones you're probably running into most often, and then let's look at simple, clear ways to sort them out.
Makes sense.
It's all about making these focused improvements that actually make a difference to how natural your English sounds, how confident you feel saying it. Moving from sentences that might sound, I don't know, a little bit off perhaps to a native speaker.
Right.
The sentences that just flow better, that follow the standard patterns.
Oh, yeah. It really sounds like a roadmap, doesn't it? Designed to help you sidestep those frequent grammar potholes on the road to sounding more fluent. Okay, so based on this source, where does this roadmap start? What's the first big pitfall it points to?
Yes. The articles, those tiny, tiny words, a, an, and they. Your source definitely highlights these as, well, arguably one of the biggest and most frequent areas where learners slip up.
And they are tiny, aren't they? A, and, they,
There.
one or two.
Pero.
It feels kind of crazy that these little things cause so much hassle. But the source really hammers home the point that these articles, small as they are, can completely change what a sentence means, depending on if you use them right or, if you leave them out when they're needed or put them in when they're not.
Oh, absolutely. The core rule your source talks about is pretty fundamental. It sounds simple when you just say it.
Yeah.
But using it consistently when you're actually talking, that's the real challenge. So the rule is use a or an when you mean something general, something not specific. One of many.
Okay. General, a or an.
And use the when you mean something specific, something unique, or maybe something we've already talked about. So we both know which one we mean.
Right, specific. The. Okay, let's really break that down. The source gives some key examples. It says, if I say I saw a cat in the street, what's that telling us? Using a cat.
That tells you the speaker saw, well, any old cat, just some random cat. It wasn't a particular cat that the listener probably knows or that the speaker has mentioned before. It's just one cat.
Yeah.
An unspecified cat.
Yeah.
The A flags it as nonspecific. Its particular identity isn't really the point.
Gotcha. Just some cat. And then they contrast that perfectly with the other example. But if I say I saw the cat on my neighbor's porch, now it's the. What's the shift there? What is the signal?
That shift, signal specificity. Big time. Using the implies this is a particular cat. Maybe it's the cat that belongs to the neighbor, and you both know that cat. Or maybe you were just talking about a cat a minute ago, and now the speaker is referring back to that specific one. The is for when the noun the cat, in this case, is unique in the situation, or it's already been identified, or it's clearly understood from the context which one we're talking about.
That difference between general, non-specific a or an and specific the is just. It's huge, isn't it?
It really is fundamental.
And your source also flags another related mistake here, which is using the when you actually mean something general, like a whole category or concept. The example they give is saying, I like the pizza, when you just mean you like pizza generally as a food.
Yes, that's super common. Happens all the time. Because in English, when you talk about general concepts or categories of things, or often uncountable nouns like types of food, abstract ideas, materials, you usually use no article at all.
Ah, the zero article.
Exactly. Sometimes called the zero article. You just leave it out.
And your source gives the correct general forms for those examples. I like pizza, or I love chocolate. Note the.
Spot on. When you say, I like pizza, just like that, you're talking about your general feeling about pizza as a food category.
Right, all pizza, basically.
Pretty much. But if you said, I like the pizza, that immediately makes me think, which pizza? The one we're eating now. The one we had last night. The specific pizza from that restaurant.
Okay.
The bit makes it specific. Same with chocolate. I love chocolate, general statement about the substance. But I love the chocolate you bought me for my birthday. Now we're talking about a specific, identifiable bar or box of chocolate.
Okay, so let's try and sum that up using the source's examples again just to nail it down. If I see some random dog, any dog, trotting down the street, following the source, I should say, I saw a dog.
Yep, any dog. Non-specific.
But if I'm talking about, say, that dog, the neighbor's dog that always barks, the specific one we both know.
Then it's, I saw the dog, because
Yeah.
we know which one, specific.
Right, and if I'm just expressing my general lifelong affection for that wonderful brown stuff.
Then it's just, I love chocolate. Zero article.
Not I love the chocolate.
Exactly, unless you mean that specific piece right in front of you.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Getting articles right really adds, well, clarity, doesn't it? Precision.
It absolutely does. It helps you signal whether you're talking about one instance out of many, or a particular unique one, or the whole concept.
Nailing that distinction, which your source really boils down to that specific versus general idea, it just makes your English sound so much more, well, natural and accurate to someone who grew up speaking it. It's a small tweak, potentially, but the impact is pretty big.
Yeah, I can see that. It definitely makes things clearer.
Ah.
Okay, so moving on from articles, though they're clearly important, the source highlights another error that's incredibly common, and this one's about just a single letter, usually an "es," stuck on the end of a verb, specifically in the present simple tense.
Ah, yes. Forgetting to add the S, or sometimes it's to the end of the verb when your subject is third person singular. That's he, she, or it, and you're using the present simple. Oh, man. This one catches so many people out, and it seems to stick around even when learners are quite advanced sometimes. Your source gives an example of the mistake. Someone might say, she walked to work every day. Or maybe, he liked coffee.
Exactly. And that phrase, every day, in the first example, clearly signals a habit or routine. That calls for the present simple tense in English.
Right.
But while walk and like are the base verbs, when the subject is she or he in the present simple, they need that little ace ending. It's a grammatical requirement. So your source gives the correct versions. She walks to work every day, and he likes coffee.
But that's essential there.
And your source lays out the rule for the present simple really clearly. It's probably worth just going over that again, maybe with a few more examples, because it's just so fundamental, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do that. The rule itself is straightforward. For the subjects I, you, we, and they, you just use the basic form of the verb, the infinitive without to.
So, like the source says, I work, you play. Let's add a few. We eat dinner at 7. They speak English. See? No S needed for those subjects. Simple base verb.
Right. Simple enough. But then comes the crucial part, the bit the source is really focusing on, where the error happens for he, she, and it's the third person singular.
That's where you have to add the S, or sometimes S, to the verb in the present simple.
Right. So the source's examples. He works, she watches, it goes. Let's expand on that pattern like the source suggests. How about, he reads the newspaper every morning.
Perfect. Add the S.
She teaches Spanish at the local college.
Add ES after T. So, teaches. Correct.
It rains quite often here.
Yep. Rains. It applies to things, concepts, animals, anything that can be replaced by it. The train arrives at noon.
Yeah.
Train it, so arrives.
And it works for names too, right? Like Sarah works downtown, Sarah, she.
Exactly. John plays the guitar, John, he. My cat sleeps all day. Cat it. So sleeps. It's consistent for any singular noun or pronoun that isn't I or you.
It's not just action verbs either, is it? Your source implies it's for state verbs too in the present simple with Heshite, like he seems nice.
Absolutely. She owns a small business. It looks cloudy. Or the verb have, which is irregular. He has a brother. She has blue eyes. It has 4 legs. The form changes to has for Heshite.
Right. Has is the irregular one there. So that little as or the change to has, it's doing a lot of grammatical work. It's signaling both present simple tense and third person singular subject.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a specific marker for that combination in English.
Yeah.
It's one of those features that might not exist in your first language, which is often why it gets missed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your source gives some really practical advice here. It says something like, listen to yourself when speaking. If you're talking about he, she, or it, don't forget that S at the end of the verb.
That's great advice. That's self-monitoring. Just knowing the rule exists is step 1, which your source clearly lays out. But then actively listening to yourself is step 2. Catching yourself if you say, he goes, and correcting it, even in your head, to he goes. That practice, that awareness, is how you build the habit of using it correctly. It's a small detail, but getting it right consistently really cleans up your grammar for everyday statements about habits, routines, and facts.
Definitely feels like one of those things that when you nail it, your English just sounds, well, more standard, more fluent, almost instantly. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Moving from verb endings to the structure of whole sentences specifically, how we ask questions in English. Your source points to another area where, again, trying to translate directly from your native language can really lead you astray.
Oh, yes. Question formation. This is a massive hurdle for many learners, mainly because English question structure, particularly in standard forms, is often quite different from how questions work in other languages.
Right.
And as your source points out, the root cause of many mistakes here is exactly that, applying your first language's sentence pattern directly onto English.
And the classic example your source provides of this kind of mistake is someone saying, you like coffee, with a rising intonation, hoping that makes it a question about preference.
Right. And in many languages, that might be perfectly fine. You take the statement, you like coffee, raise your voice at the end, maybe add a question word, and boom, it's a question.
But standard English, not so much.
For many common question types, no. Standard English relies very heavily on using auxiliary verbs, often called helping verbs, and putting them right at the beginning of the sentence to signal it's a question.
Okay, and your source does a good job laying out these typical English question structures. For many basic questions, the ones that aren't using the verb to be or a modal like can or will, it says you need to start with do or does. So that incorrect example, you like coffee, the correct standard form, according to the source, is do you like coffee?
Exactly. Do is the auxiliary verb here. It comes before the subject you, and then you have the main verb like in its base form.
And if the subject was he, she, or it,
then you'd use does, connecting back to our previous point about that third person as. So, does she like coffee? Does he work here? Does it snow in winter? The auxiliary do, or does, takes that position at the very start for these present simple questions.
Okay. Then the source also covers questions that do use the verb to be, like is or are. The structure's a bit different, but it still involves moving a verb up front, right? The example given is she coming to the party?
Correct. For any question using the verb to be, whether asking about identity, are you Sarah, is he a doctor, state, are you tired, is it cold outside, location, are they upstairs, is the book on the table, or actions happening right now using the present continuous tense. Are you watching this? Is he sleeping? Are they playing outside? The be verb itself, am, is, or are, moves to the front before the subject.
So you just invert the subject and the be verb from the statement form, she is coming, becomes is she coming?
Exactly. Simple inversion in that case.
And then finally, your source touches on questions with modal verbs can, will, should, etc. Their examples were, can you swim, and will they be there?
Right. And the pattern here is similar to the be verbs, with modal verbs like can, could, may, might, should, must, and also with will for future questions. The modal verb itself, or will, is the word that jumps to the front of the sentence before the subject.
Okay.
Then comes the subject and then the main verb, usually in its base form no to, no ing, no ends. So let's add a few more based on the source's pattern. Should we leave now? Could you pass the salt? Might it rain later? Must I finish this report today? Will dinner be ready soon? Modal. The modal or will leads the way.
So the really big takeaway here from your source about questions is that standard English fundamentally relies on putting these special verbs, the auxiliaries like do, does, is, are, am, or the modals like can, will, should, right at the start to flag it as a question.
Yes. That's the core mechanism for most standard question types. It's a structural pillar of English grammar that's often very different from other languages, and that's why just translating word for word often doesn't produce a grammatically sound question in English. Getting used to starting questions with these helper verbs is key.
And it seems like this whole idea of needing these helper verbs, these auxiliaries, comes up again when your source starts talking about negative sentences.
It certainly does, because forming negatives in English, much like forming questions, also frequently requires an auxiliary verb, especially in the simple tenses, which isn't always the case in other languages.
Right.
Your source points out a very common related mistake. Learners forgetting to use the auxiliary verb do or does when they make a sentence negative, particularly in the present simple.
And the example of this mistake they give is someone saying, I not like spicy food.
Yeah, which again, you can see how that might come from direct translation. Maybe in their language, you just put a negative word like not after the subject or maybe after the verb.
But standard English needs more machinery there.
In this case, yes, your source shows the correct form. I don't like spicy food.
Don't being the contraction for do not.
Exactly. That do not or don't construction is essential for making present simple sentences negative when the main verb isn't be or a modal verb.
And again, if the subject is he, she, or it,
then you need doesn't, which is short for does not. Again, connecting back to that third-person rule. So following the source's logic, she doesn't like spicy food. He doesn't live here anymore. It doesn't work. You need do not or does not or their contractions, plus the base form of the main verb.
Your source really drives this home, stating clearly. So always remember in English, negatives and questions need an auxiliary verb like do or does, linking those two concepts together.
Yes, it's a crucial link. It highlights this fundamental structural feature of English simple tenses, present and past. When you're not using be or a modal, this verb do steps in to act as the grammatical helper, the scaffold, for both questions and negatives. It's different from negating be verbs, he is not happy, or they're not ready, where you just add not. Or negating modals, you cannot enter, or she should not go, where you also just add not, or use contractions like can't, shouldn't.
Right.
But for other verbs in the simple present or simple past, you need that do auxiliary for negatives. I didn't go, we don't understand, he doesn't know. That do support is vital and often missed by learners whose first languages handle negation differently.
Okay, that clarifies the role of do and does a lot. Let's move on to tackle what your source calls a classic mistake, which sounds intimidating. It's about mixing up the past simple and the present perfect tenses.
Yes. This is definitely a trickier area for many learners. It feels more abstract, perhaps, because both tenses deal with actions or states in the past, but they frame those past events differently, especially regarding the connection to the present moment or how specifically the time is mentioned.
Okay. Your source gives a couple of really common examples of how people get this wrong. First, they mention hearing learners say, I have went.
Right. This one is actually an error in the form of the verb used with the present perfect. The present perfect tense structure is have, or has for he height, plus the past participle of the main verb.
Okay, past participle, not simple past.
Exactly. The simple past of go is went, but the past participle is gone. So saying I have went is wrong because it uses the simple past form went after have. The correct present perfect form, as your source points out, needs the past participle, I have gone.
Got it. So you need to know those past participles, go, went, gone, see, saw, seen, eat, ate, eaten, etc.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's part of mastering the present perfect, knowing the correct third form of the verb.
Okay, so that's a form error. The other incorrect example your source gives gets more into the when to use which tense. I have seen him yesterday.
Yes, and this one highlights a really key difference in usage between the two tenses.
Yeah.
Have seen is the correct form of the present perfect for the verb see. The problem here is using it with yesterday.
Why is that a problem? What's the core rule your source offers to help tell them apart?
The source states the main guideline very clearly. Use past simple with specific times, and the flip side is use present perfect when the time is not mentioned, or when the time is indefinite or ongoing.
Ah, okay. So yesterday is definitely a specific time in the past. It's finished.
Absolutely.
So according to the source's rule, that specific time reference, yesterday, means we must use the past simple tense.
That's right.
Therefore, the correct sentence is, I saw him yesterday, using saw, the simple past form of see.
Exactly. When you pinpoint the time the action happened with a finished past time marker, like yesterday, last week, last month, in 2010, 5 minutes ago. When I was a child, standard English requires the past simple.
Let's try a few more examples based on that rule. We finished the project last Friday.
Perfect. Specific time, past simple, finished.
She visited her parents 2 days ago.
Yep. Visited, past simple.
They got married in June, assuming June is finished.
Correct. Got.
Oh.
Past simple.
Okay. And then the other side of the coin, according to your source. If there's no specific finished time mentioned, or the exact time isn't really the point, that's when the present perfect comes in. Your source uses its earlier examples again to illustrate this. It says, I saw her yesterday is right because yesterday is specific, but I have seen her before is also right. Why is that one right?
Because before isn't a specific finished point in time like yesterday was. Before just means at some point or multiple points in the past leading up to now, the exact moment isn't stated or important.
Ah, I see. So the present perfect often connects the past action to the present in some way, or talks about life experience up to now.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
often used for experiences. I have visited Paris 3 times, meaning in my life up until now, the exact dates aren't the focus. Or for recent past actions with present results. Oh no, I've lost my wallet. The losing happened recently. The result is I don't have it now.
Okay. Compare that with I lost my wallet yesterday. Specific time, so past simple.
Perfect contrast. That really shows the difference the source is highlighting.
So it really boils down to how you're framing that past event. Is the focus on when it happened at a specific finished time, use past simple, or is the focus on the experience itself or the connection to now without a specific finished time, use present perfect?
That's a great way to summarize it. And the source's tip, look for those specific past time words like yesterday, last week, ago, in 2019, is a really practical first step. If you see one of those, chances are you need the past simple.
Yeah, that feels like a useful shortcut while you're getting the hang of the deeper nuances.
It definitely provides a concrete signal for learners grappling with this common confusion point. It's a solid piece of advice from the source.
Okay, wow. We've really dug into some major grammar points there, all based on your source. We've hit articles A and the zero article, that tricky S in the present simple for he shite, the essential structure for English questions and negatives using auxiliaries, and now this difference between past simple and present perfect based on time reference.
Key areas, definitely.
But then your source does something really valuable, I think. It kind of zooms out a little, shifts perspective.
Yes, it brings in a dose of realism and, frankly, comfort. It acknowledges that, look, grammar mistakes, they happen. Everyone learning English makes them.
Right.
And crucially, especially when you're just having a normal, casual conversation, many of those little slips, a missed article here, slightly wrong verb ending there, they don't actually stop communication.
That's such an important point to hear. You might forget the A or say he go instead of he goes or mix up the tense. But 9 times out of 10, the person you're talking to, they'll probably still get your meaning. Context does a lot of heavy lifting.
Absolutely. Your source makes it clear that being understood is often possible, even if your grammar isn't textbook perfect. That should hopefully take some pressure off, allow you to relax a bit more when speaking.
Definitely.
However, the source then pivots slightly. It says, okay, while communication might happen anyway, there's real value in working on these specific common mistakes we've discussed.
Ah, okay. So why work on them if people understand anyway?
Because according to the source, it's not just about basic understanding. If your aim is to sound more fluent, more accurate, maybe more professional or polished, depending on the context,
Right.
and ultimately just more natural, like you really have a feel for the language, then Targeting and cleaning up these common errors is how you get there.
So there's a difference between just getting the message across and actually sounding like you've mastered the nuances and patterns of the language.
Precisely. Working on these specific errors identified by the source helps bridge that gap. It refines your English, makes it smoother, more standard.
And your source adds another interesting layer here, talking about flexibility in spoken English. It mentions that sometimes, especially in informal chats, and maybe it varies by region, the rules can seem a bit bendy.
Yes, it touches on the difference between prescriptive grammar, the rules in the books, and descriptive grammar, how people actually talk. It acknowledges that spoken language, especially informal spoken language, can sometimes deviate from the strict rules.
And this is where that specific, kind of surprising example comes in. The source notes that in informal American English, you might sometimes hear someone say, "She don't like coffee."
Right. Now, based on everything we just established from the source about standard rules,
Yeah.
the grammatically correct form for present simple, negative, third person, singular, she is absolutely she doesn't like coffee, using does not.
Okay, so "she don't" is technically incorrect by standard rules.
According to standard prescriptive grammar, yes, it is. But the source is making an observational point here. It's saying, descriptively, this usage, she don't, does exist. You might encounter it in certain informal spoken contexts, specifically mentioning American English here.
That's actually really helpful for a learner to know, isn't it? Because you might hear it and get confused thinking, wait, didn't I learn it was doesn't?
Exactly. The source isn't saying she don't is the correct way you should aim for, especially if you want your English to be widely understood and accepted as standard.
Right.
What it's doing is acknowledging linguistic reality. Language changes. It varies between regions, between formal and informal settings. Hearing she don't is an example of that variation. It's presented as an informal variant, not the standard target form.
It really highlights that sometimes there's a gap between the official rules and how language gets used on the street, so to speak. Understanding that helps you navigate what you hear. You can recognize "she don't" as informal, understand the meaning, but still know that "she doesn't" is the standard form you should probably be using yourself in most situations.
Precisely. It shows that language has different registers. So the overall takeaway from the source, balancing all these points, the need for accuracy, for fluency, the fact that mistakes are okay, and the existence of these informal variations, it boils down to something very practical, basically. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but also listen carefully and correct yourself when you can.
That really does feel like the perfect balance, doesn't it? Be brave, speak, accept errors as part of learning, but also keep your ears open. Notice things. Notice your own speech. Notice what sounds right, and gently try to adjust and improve over time.
It promotes that active learning cycle. Try. Notice. Adjust. Try again. It's about engaging with the language, not just passively receiving rules. That's how you make real, lasting progress.
Okay, so pulling all this great insight together from your source material, let's get really concrete. Here's the challenge it sets out for you, the listener, to actually put this into practice.
Right. Step one is simple. Just listen to yourself speak English today. Pay a bit more attention than usual to the words you're choosing, the sentences you're forming.
Maybe even record yourself talking for a minute or two. Could be helpful if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, that can be really revealing listening back. So step one, listen. Step two, pick one. Just one of these common mistakes we've talked about today.
Just one, not all of them.
Nope, just one to start. Don't overwhelm yourself. Maybe it's articles. Maybe it's remembering the S for he, shite. Maybe it's getting do or does into your questions. Pick the one that resonates most with you, the one you suspect you might be doing.
Okay, focus on one target. Then what?
Step three, practice saying it correctly out loud. Consciously form sentences using the right structure. If you pick the as issue, literally say things like, he works hard, she likes tea, it looks nice. Say them over and over. Make up your own examples about your life. Get your mouth used to the correct pattern.
Active practice. Makes sense. And the source also adds a nice reflective touch, suggesting you think about this. Consider a grammar mistake you used to make pretty often, but now you've managed to fix it. What was it? How did you realize you were making it? And what did you actually do to get better at it?
That's such a good exercise because it reminds you that progress is possible. You fixed things before.
Yeah.
Thinking about how you overcame a previous challenge can give you ideas and confidence for tackling the current one. It proves the process works.
That's really motivating, actually. Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground today, really unpacking the source you provided. We've pinpointed those common grammar traps articles, the present simple, question negative structures, past simple versus present perfect.
The big ones.
And we've laid out the clear rules and simple tips your source offers for navigating them.
And hopefully, we've also echoed the source's really important underlying message. Mistakes are normal, they're part of learning. Don't let the fear of errors hold you back. Practice is key.
Absolutely. And thinking about that informal example the source brought up, she don't like coffee. It does leave us with a fascinating question to ponder, doesn't it? Based on everything we've explored from this source, how does knowing about both the standard correct grammar rules and the existence of these informal, real-world variations actually change how you approach learning and practicing English? Do you just aim strictly for the textbook standard? Or does knowing about things like she don't make you think differently about correctness or listen differently, perhaps?
It really gets you thinking about language as a living thing, doesn't it? Not just a set of static rules. It's a constant navigation between what's formally right and how people genuinely communicate.
Definitely something to mull over. Now, your source material apparently also gives a little clue about what's next. It mentions the topic for the following day is about telling stories in English. And how to make your speaking more engaging.
Oh, that sounds like a fantastic next step. Moving from the nuts and bolts of grammar accuracy into using the language more dynamically, more expressively, perfect way to apply some of these corrected structures.
Couldn't agree more. Well, we really hope this deep dive into your source on common grammar mistakes has been useful, giving you some clear targets on practical strategies.
Keep listening, keep speaking, don't be afraid to stumble a little. That's how you learn to walk confidently. Keep refining. You can definitely do this.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.